Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of Identity Library. My name is Veronica Becher, and today I'm again with my favorite person on earth. I'm joking. No, you are Lucas Ciscato.
Ciscato. Since we're gonna start about talking about Italy a little, we gotta do it the right way. Ciscato.
Okay, I apologize. I feel like I never can properly pronounce you. I'm just confused in what language I should pronounce your last name. So we're starting a new episode, and dear listeners, I hope you have a wonderful week whenever this episode is getting aired. But maybe to give you a little bit of rundown why we're doing this episode, what's happening, what we're talking about, again with Lucas. I'm joking. Basically, our fellowship program had this family breakfast thing.
Mm-hmm.
Where you invite, like the name says, your family over so you can together, meet each other and sit and talk to each other's parents and be terrified because I was literally without a family and I was the only kid there without a family. That's how it felt like. Maybe there were more culpables, but it was just terrifying. And nothing terrifies me more than hearing from someone's parents that they listen to my podcast episodes.
No, but the way my parents said it too was really funny. What did they say?
No, go ahead. You can tell the story.
But my parents were like, they went up to Veronica and were like, "We know everything about you."
And when Abdullah tells me that I'm a stalker because I listen to his podcast, well, I'm sorry, but Lucas' parents probably just reached the point where I don't know, they are not stalkers, don't worry. But I'm really honored to hear that there's a whole family listening apparently to my podcast while driving. And I realize the most frequent listeners to my podcast are people that sit in cars. Maybe I should just start like a car podcast at this point. And everyone is crossing, stuck somewhere in traffic or trying to get somewhere else, and it's always these like long trips where people just listen to my podcast. So they walked up to me and like Lucas said and were like, "Yeah, we'll listen to your podcast." And what did your dad say?
Well, apparently with the podcast we recorded, I don't know exactly when it was, but a few weeks ago, maybe over a month ago, I don't know, I kind of apparently neglected my Italian culture too much and did not talk about it.
Shame on you.
Especially when I said that Australians knew how to make coffee better than Italians.
Shame on you again. Triple shame on you. It's like this joke from Mulan. If you've watched it, shame on you, shame on your cow, shame on everything. I love this one. One scene. I love Mulan, but basically we're gonna come back to Mulan. But today we're initially gonna talk actually about his heritage that is connected to Italy. And I know we have so many Italian students on campus that I could have picked for this episode, but no. We need to defend against the Dutch. I'm joking. Go ahead, my dear friend. However you want to start, maybe, you want to give our listeners a little rundown of who you are, short, please, because they probably listened to it already 1,000 times.
So basically, my name's Lucas, like you heard, and I was born in Mexico. I lived in Hong Kong, in Mexico, Hong Kong, China, the Netherlands for a year, and I stayed in Italy for a few months trying to get my visa to move to the US, which I did in 2013. So I've kind of lived all over the place, and my mom is Dutch and my dad's Italian, so everything I've lived through has also been through the cultural lens of a Dutch mom and an Italian dad. And I also learned how to speak Dutch and Italian from them, and I used to be fluent in Spanish when I lived in Mexico until I kind of lost that, which I will hopefully pick up soon again.
Thank you. Just chef kiss. That was the best short introduction that I could have ever expected from you. So, since we neglected one culture over another, we have to talk about Italy.
Right.
And I would love you to start. So maybe with the basics. When did you start living in Italy? Like, how old were you?
So for living in Italy was literally just like a few months of time. It was in 2013, like right after school ended in the Netherlands. We went to Italy to an apartment that we still own that my dad actually grew up in. So my dad lived there his entire life and then inherited the apartment from my grandpa, from his dad. And yeah, it's an Airbnb, so if you want to stay in Via Tedeschi, Padova, it's available, and it helps us sustain the fact that we have an apartment there. So it's on Airbnb. But
You have to
yeah.
pay me for giving you the platform to advertise your Airbnb. But yes, this is how I make money. And fund other people. I'm joking. Maybe for people that never been to Italy and don't know where this is located, can you like allocate where we are? Where is the Airbnb like on the map?
Northeast, like a 30-minute drive from Venice.
Perfect. Thank you. That was exactly what. So, people, you've heard it. We have a trustworthy person right now on stage that you can trust that their Airbnb is going to be okay and you're not going to live in some random shady corner. You know, have you ever experienced that, by the way?
Living in a shady corner?
Yes.
If we go for a very random sidetrack, the hostel that I stayed at in Brussels was the sketchiest place I've ever been. Brussels
Oh my gosh.
is the sketchiest and shady city I have ever visited, and specifically where my hostel was and where I was walking at like 2 a.m. in the night.
I should not say that because the person who was sitting next to me when we had one of the dinners with the faculty was actually from Belgium.
Oh.
But I agree on that point. So please, if anyone from Belgium is listening, please don't take it to heart. But I agree in a certain way. It's just a mix of everything, but it's okay. You know, we love our Belgian people. Go ahead. So, you lived in Italy, and would you say there were certain traditions that are typical Italian traditions or lifestyles? That's crazy. Aspects of your lifestyle that were influenced by Italian culture.
One thing is drinking coffee every day. I grew up from I think from when I was probably around 8, maybe even younger, I think even younger. I'm not sure exactly. Not drinking coffee. I see the face you're making about.
I was like,
I did try coffee and did like it, but with a lot of sugar then. But what I was gonna say is I grew up making the coffee for my parents. Like we have this like traditional mocha pot that you put on the stovetop, and it makes an espresso shot. And well, actually, my brother started drinking coffee very young. My older brother, because it can help with ADHD, and because it's a stimulant that helps. I'm not going to try to explain the science behind it. You can fact check me right now and say that it's not true, but that's what my parents believed or did at this time, instead of trying to use medicine or something like that, just to see if there was an alternative that might work. And because I am a younger brother to him, obviously I was jealous that my older brother got to drink this special drink that my parents loved that I couldn't drink. So I convinced them to also let me start drinking coffee at a young age. So that's one thing. What else? My family always did value like having family dinners. So we would always, that's a very Italian thing, trying to gather the family as much as possible. And we took that and we did it every night when we when we lived everywhere except for when we moved to the US, like after we all were in like high school, middle school, high school time period, because the US is like so hustle bustle culture and try to do as much as possible, and like everything's all over the place. My little brother would play soccer until a certain time. I would be in theater or speech and debate all night long, and my older brother was doing marching band and was doing these other things. So we all were kind of spread thin, and to the point where it's really hard to find a time where we could eat dinner together. So in the last couple of years that we kind of lost that tradition, but it was always a thing that we really valued as a family, and we still try like for important things or even just when we can to make it happen.
At what time would you eat?
Late. That's another Italian thing for sure. I mean, besides when it got impacted by our schedules and stuff in the US, like I still right now when I go, like right now it's 7:38 and I would not eat probably until like 9. Despite the fact that we're doing this right now, it's just, for me, it feels much more natural to eat later at night because that's just how I grew up.
When would you start though your day? Like you mentioned to me once that the way you drink coffee, there's a whole tradition when you drink, what you drink, and your mom was actually also telling me about that, and I would love you to talk about that.
Well, hopefully I don't misrepresent it too much, but in Italy, you don't drink something coffee with any kind of sweetening or milk after 11-ish, 10-ish. So it's like, for example, cappuccino, strictly breakfast. It's not something that you will drink past that time, and it won't even be available in most places in Italy past a certain time, unless it's like Starbucks, of course. But
why? Do you know that?
I think it's just that my assumption is that it has to do with just having milk, like sweetened milk or milk for breakfast. Like milk is strictly a breakfast thing. I don't know exactly how to say that.
I was thinking maybe that's just an assumption. I have no idea what it is, but milk is the freshest in the morning. Because really often what do you get in the morning is like milk, eggs.
Yeah.
So if you have really fresh milk that is not like, maybe go back into, and I might be completely wrong what I'm saying, but I can imagine one of the things is you would like the milk to be fresh when you start, and something lighter maybe too.
Yeah.
And you would just get the fresh milk. It will probably not survive till the end of the day type of thing. And you would just pour it into your coffee. I have no idea.
I'm pretty sure with Italian culture, breakfast isn't a big thing. Like, it's like a small sweet thing that you might eat, like a brioche, or like, which is like a croissant basically with something in it, with a filling or something.
Like we call it also milk bread.
Yeah.
Brioche, like
oh yeah, that too. Yes.
yeah, just like Milchbrötchen. That's the shit, like
it's a type of bread.
milk
Yeah.
bread, milk buns. That's the thing in Germany.
Yeah. So it's usually like a smaller thing, and it is strictly sweet. You don't eat something salty or savory for breakfast, nor do you eat something sweet or something sweet for lunch or dinner. So my cousin, when she came, she was also an exchange student actually, in the US, and she stayed with us in 2020, so COVID. And when we went to like Chick-fil-A, and she saw that you could eat fries for breakfast, or tater tots even. That's a traditional American thing for breakfast, or at least Southern. And she was like she was so in awe and confused or like shocked by it, because she's like, how could you eat potatoes with salt for breakfast?
Hash
like,
browns.
Yeah.
Yeah. I actually love that tradition. For some reason, I'm not a sweet morning breakfast person at all. Something I've experienced with my partner. It's like you have this situation when he just loves sweets in the morning, and you order this croissant that's with chocolate, and my option's always the ham and cheese one. It's like a really funny thing, maybe. But I don't know, something about sweet breakfast is just not my thing, and I don't crave it as much. And I've been being really bad with like eating breakfast, so I eat apples every single time. If you see me on campus with a random apple, that's me. I don't see that many people eating random apples or bananas on the street. Litchi once got a comment. Someone was in the elevator with me, and I answered it, and he looked at me like I'm crazy because of eating banana. And then after a while, we started laughing both. We didn't even know each other, and he was like, "This is so funny. Like, you're just eating banana in the elevator." I'm like, "I don't have time. I'm running late to class." He's like, "At least it's healthy." But yeah, maybe a little fun fact. But coming back maybe to the story of like how you drink coffee and so on. What is your favorite maybe brunch, breakfast food that is maybe really Italian?
I would say like something I can specifically remember is sometimes for breakfast we would, and I think it's more the nostalgia also of doing this, but when we were in Italy we would like walk from the apartment down to a little street shop, I guess you can call it. Like the main street is there, and then you see a little shop, and you could get like different croissants or brioche or things like that. And I would always like enjoy when we went there, get one with Nutella, because that's also a very big thing in Italy, and have a cappuccino with that. So just like Nutella brioche with a cappuccino. My grandpa worked at a hazelnut how do you call it, paste, what is it called in English, spread, hazelnut spread, in Dutch it's paste. Anyway, hazelnut spread company. I don't know if it was Nutella, but basically it was like the same kind of thing, so I'll just refer to it as Nutella. And my grandpa would come home with these huge tubs of Nutella every week, and my dad had so bad teeth after his childhood because he could just eat unlimited Nutella, and that's what he would do for breakfast.
This reminds me of, speaking of big sizes, even though it's not.
Okay. Sure, that was the main topic, was the big size of the tub.
No, we're not talking about that. We're talking about a favorite cheese that is really Italian.
Parmigiano?
Yes, my dear.
Parmesan?
Yes, like my ex-boyfriend would say, Parmigiano Reggiano.
Yeah.
And I remember at their like dinner table, they would have this huge block of Parmesan just standing like by itself.
I have it in my apartment.
True, yeah, I remember.
I do have it in my apartment.
So if you want to ever, be a thief, you know now.
Please don't. It's too expensive here. It's like $20 for that block of cheese.
That's the point. That's the point. That's why you choose wisely what you try to like break inside. Basically this huge block of cheese, and they would just have this block of cheese in the middle of the table by itself, and you would eat it, and you think about it every single time, how many calories you just right now take into yourself, and then you're like, but it tastes so good, it's freshly made.
Protein.
So not that's crazy. So no one questions that. Maybe like, so yeah, talking of big sizes, that's what I was initially trying to say.
Okay.
Coming back to the topic, or going away from the topic rather. You can think about other things in life. I'm not gonna be the one inspiring you. I just gave you the inspiration. Maybe a different thing. What language, like, how do you communicate in your family? That's something.
Ooh, that is actually a really interesting question. Originally, when we lived in Mexico / Hong Kong, it was the most interesting dynamic because it was English at school, Dutch with my mom, Italian with my dad, and then Spanish with my brothers. So in my daily life, I would speak 4 different languages at all times.
This is fantastic. This would be my dream. Seriously, knowing so many languages fluently. Oh my gosh. And what are your Chinese skills?
Well, I'll tell you why Chinese never developed in a second. But with that, when we moved to China, because we weren't in Mexico anymore, we didn't actually continue practicing Spanish, so we lost that out of our sibling way of communicating, I guess. But the interesting thing about the language dynamic in my family is all of us speak Italian. My dad speaks Spanish, Italian, and English. My mom speaks, at least, this is what she'll claim to speak, is English, Dutch, Italian, and Spanish. She also knows German and some other languages, kind of, but she doesn't. German, she took 4 years of in high school, but she doesn't consider that. She actually speaks it. And French, she's also pretty, she can understand it and stuff. Anyway, and then my brothers and I speak Dutch, Italian, and English, and then Spanish varies from my little brother hardly speaks it, or doesn't really speak it, and I don't know how well he understands it. I don't know. For me, I can understand it if I'm in a conversation and I'm listening with context and everything, but I can't really speak it. And then my older brother, he lived in Mexico for 8 years of his life versus me 4 years since I was born there. So he actually can speak Spanish still. So the weird thing about this, the reason why I bring this up, is all of us speak Italian, but for some reason we developed the habit of always speaking Dutch in our family, except for with my dad. So we'll be at the dinner table, and we're when we're speaking with each other, amongst my mom and my brothers, we're speaking Dutch. And then when we want to address my dad, when we want to include him in the conversation, we'll be like, oh, let's speak Italian for him. And then he'll respond in Italian, and then we'll continue the conversation in Dutch. And it's we're excluding him from family conversations, which is kind of sad. And it especially is a problem, I guess, when there's some kind of argument in the family, and we're arguing in Dutch, and then he thinks he understands what we're talking about, and he'll interject and be give his meaning, and we're that had nothing to do with what we were just talking about. You got that way off base. Basically when we have arguments or something, and he is left out in that way. But also when we just have good family dinners or something, it's kind of sad that we have that habit. And I've been trying to break that, trying to speak as much Italian as possible when he's there, but it's just one of those things where you're so used to it. It's so natural to me to speak Dutch to my mom and to my brothers that it feels really weird if I try to speak Italian to them.
This is maybe the weirdest question, but if you, hypothetically speaking, would have children, what language would you teach them?
If I had children, that's actually something I think about, because I also think if I have a partner that is also speaks different languages, right? How does that end up working out? I think it would be really cool if they could speak Italian and Dutch at least, and then English, of course, and then whatever is important to my partner. But
so what I'm hearing is, dear founders of Tinder, please establish a filter option to filter languages that people speak.
There you go.
I want to have a partner that speaks only these languages in the future, so my children will learn these languages
There you
too.
go.
Oh my gosh! But I sometimes think about that. My thought sometimes even goes towards if I ever want to marry someone, and the person is not from Germany,
Mm-hmm.
but my ancestry and like ancestors, everyone is across the globe somewhere else. In what language is the wedding is gonna be? And then half my family doesn't speak German at all. The other half only speak German. They don't speak, or they speak Russian. But then, can you imagine like marrying an American, and then the person doesn't speak any of these two languages, and then the other part of my family doesn't speak English, and I'm just sitting there like, oh my gosh, this is a thing that I will never think about. This reminds me how I went on a Polish wedding once, and I had no idea what, like, I don't speak Polish. To a Polish wedding, and because of my Russian roots, I kind of understood half of it, but it was funny as heck because only 3 people in this whole like huge wedding could speak English.
Were there any like specific, like interesting Polish traditions with weddings? Because I know weddings can have some really weird traditions that are like, I was invited to a, where was it? I'm gonna have to look on it on the map. But I was invited to a wedding, and the person was hypothetically invited, kind of, because it's in Africa. But the person was like, you have no idea how intricate our wedding process is, and I'm now very interested in experiencing different culture weddings. So what was the Polish wedding like?
So it was a non 100% traditional wedding, but the way it worked, it was a 2 days wedding where they decided to modernize the whole idea, and you have the actual wedding day. That is really traditional, religious. You go to a church, you have the whole process, and then people dance, drink, eat certain specific dishes that are like meant for it, play games with each other, against each other, compete. It's a fun event. And then the second day, everyone, this is so funny to me, everyone who's so drunk because is trying to recover sober up in the morning. And basically you have this like morning brunch where people dress up again in a different like style, and you just eat breakfast or brunch with everyone, kind of as part of the family. And that's what I have experienced. And it's really common to eat this one soup. I really don't remember the name, but it has sausage in it. What's really crazy. It tastes really good though. And you just eat all the food that you don't want to go to waste from the previous day on the next day.
Yeah. That's good.
I don't know. There are a lot of traditions I feel like were just not implemented at all. And I know that there's going to be probably an episode in the future like covering weddings in particular. I think that's something that is really interesting and really diverse. But like I said, it was not too special besides all these games where you like play against each other and like the husband and wife need to like guess, like things that you see even in American culture. The only difference is probably something you see in Slavic cultures in general. People just dress up really well, and it's like the higher the high heels, the better. And my highlight of the whole wedding, I should not say that, was probably that in the bathrooms, in the women's bathrooms, you could actually get free tights, because something that happens all the time if you wear dresses and tights, that tights just break and tear, and then you have a whole hole on your like leg, and you don't want that. So what they did, they provided guests with tights that they in different sizes, so no matter what size you are, you can have a free tights that you can switch out if yours were ripped. Really random thing.
That's so considerate though. That's really cool.
And that's how I realized, I think maybe more than half of the planning went to the wife. The wife was the one thinking it through, not the husband, I think, with much love. But yeah, it was a fantastic evening. But Yeah, I haven't been to many weddings. I've been to four actually, two that I don't remember as well, and two that I remember a little bit better. Um, and the Polish wedding to be is one of the most recent ones that I've been to in 2000. I think it was sophomore year of college actually. 2000. What is it? Oh my gosh, I just blank on the year specifically, but yeah, 2 years ago.
Unless I'm misremembering, I think the last wedding I went to was in 2013, so a while ago, and it was in Italy actually, maybe 2012, 2013. And I remember thinking I was like the best dancer in the world because they were playing loud music, and I was just dancing my heart out.
I think that's also something that stick with me. But it was my dad and we went to one of his best friend's weddings, because the interesting thing is my dad is the one who's still in touch with all his college friends, and they like 6 guys or something like that, and they all still in touch with each other. And so every single time when we visit in Russia, he like gathers all the guys together, and that's where I was joke. I'm gonna say that. I'm sorry, Dad, but that's where my dad gets into this he literally, like, as a kid watching him in that like setup, I realized that he was just a college student that just loved being a college student. And he gets into his slang words, all the swear words. They like drink. They go to we don't go to sauna. It's like banyan. That's the name where you have all these like leaves that you smack each other with. Literally in this hot sauna. It's really funny, and he just transforms into the young child or like young college student. And so we visited one of his best friend's daughters actually was getting married, and they invited us. So I would dance with my dad all the time, and my mom would complain because back in the days I would for some reason only copy my dad, even though my mom would dance more than anyone else that I know. And she's like, why would you dance with the same dance moves as your dad? Don't get me wrong, my dad dances well, but it's funny as heck that I, for some reason, decided to ignore completely my mom half of my life and only focus on my dad's dance moves. And then I just I subconsciously copied them. So we would dance together all the time. Hilarious. Fun fact. But coming back maybe to the actual topic of maybe not weddings and not traveling and speaking languages, but rather I'm curious, since we're talking about Italy initially, would you say community plays a big role in Italian culture? And if yes, in what way? I know this is a loaded question, but
The answer is definitely yes. I mean, I think there are distinctions within cultures where you have very individualistic cultures like American culture, or I'd say Northwestern European culture is often more individualistic. But Italian is definitely much more of a collective culture where community matters. So you'll often have like people will go to the same coffee shop, will know the coffee owner, and will just sit there and drink coffee for hours and talk to the coffee owner or talk to family, or like it's much more community based the way society runs in general. And you find that much more in the smaller towns, of course. But also when it comes to celebrating holidays or celebrating events, it's often like a big family thing to do. And in Italy, it's, for example, it's common to have like a big family dinner where you just keep getting food. Like you'll be at a restaurant and there's a set menu basically, and they come with appetizers number one, and it's like a few different types of cheese and meats and some bread and oil, and you just eat that. And then they come with your first maybe with a soup. You drink or you eat the soup maybe with some more bread or something like that, and then a pasta, and then meat, and then like there's just constantly more and more plates coming, and then you end up with your dessert. And like I think food is a big part of that community aspect, is just celebrating and feasting with food.
Would you say like that's the reason why you sit for such a long time in a restaurant and talk, because there's so many different steps to finish and get to your dessert?
Yes. Yeah.
What maybe like speaking of alcohol, I know that's something that people don't really address, but what would you say? How much does wine in like alcohol play a role in like social gatherings?
From my understanding, like, yeah, it's a common thing to, not necessarily in a party tool kind of like a party way, more of like a, like sit down and maybe look at the stars or in a park or sit together at a table and enjoying a glass of wine. But I'm not necessarily the biggest expert on drinking culture anywhere, because I don't drink. And I was also never an adult in living or in Italy in general.
Are people romantic? Like, is there a culture like that? I know in France, for instance, you have a lot of like, poetry and like you kind of focus on these things for some reason. But is there something like that in Italy, or something that you would say is really distinctive for specifically Italian culture?
I definitely think a lot of art and music will represent like a very romantic aesthetic to it. I don't know exactly how, if the people are more focused on the romance aspect of love and things like that, but I do know that it's a lot of things are romanticized.
And I know we're kind of going through questions, but I'm just curious about different things. What is your earliest childhood memory that is associated with Italian culture?
I'd say eating food with family. We would always go to my aunt's house to eat some risotto, pumpkin flavored risotto, and then
Can you explain what risotto is for people that never heard of it?
it's like a more water-based rice. Like it's fluffier and it has more water in it. I don't know exactly how to describe it besides that, but we would eat that, and then we would have watermelon for dessert. That was a specific thing too, and in Italy, watermelon is eaten a lot.
That's interesting. I didn't know that. Is there a reason for that?
I'm not sure, honestly. I mean my guess would be that it's something that can be grown easily there, and I'm pretty sure it's an Italian thing in general, but it could also have just been that my aunt loved watermelon, so I might be like generalizing it when it's just a thing my aunt would do. But that's something I remember, is eating a lot of watermelon.
Do you maybe another thing that comes up when I think of Italy is the body language part that is part of the whole culture. Is there something specific that you feel like is really prominent about oh my gosh, body culture is crazy. About the body culture. We're covering random things today, I'm just saying.
I mean, I think in general, Italians tend to be much more externally expressive. So whether that is just expressing their emotions more by feeling their emotions and showing that, being more vulnerable in that sense. But also they definitely tend to express their emotions with big hand gestures, as you see in movies or as you would stereotype Italians as. But if you go to Italy and you see like a random guy arguing with the shop owner, like you'll see a lot of hand movements, including the classic, like, I don't know what you call this, all your fingers put together, waving your hand up and down.
Yes. I'm curious, is there a code to decode someone's body language? So, how can you understand if the person actually is just trying to be enthusiastic about their emotions and a different time when they're not happy with you? Is there like a way, or?
I don't think you really need a way to decode it. I think you can see it through facial expressions too, and the tonality of their voice. Yeah, I don't think it's very passive aggressive or hidden or anything. So you don't need to be very in tune with how someone is physically showing their emotions, because you will see it, you will hear it, you will see it.
Is there one thing that you feel like that shaped you so much regarding Italian traditions that you still keep on doing because of the way you were brought up in a certain like multicultural family?
I honestly don't know. I think because of that because I grew up in like that multicultural environment and never really lived in Italy for that long, it's really hard for me to distinguish what is my family only kind of thing or something that was actually derived from Italian culture. But I'm sure that there is more than I'm aware of that is tied to Italian culture, that maybe if I were to move to Italy for a year, I'd be like, that's why I'm different in that way, or that's why that's something that's different between me and my peers here in the US, that I didn't realize was Italian. I just thought it was my family or it was just me. So I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but I would imagine that if I was exposed to specifically Italian culture, that there's some things that I would be able to pick out, like, oh, this is where that comes from.
I would love to kind of maybe, unless there's something that you feel like you would love to share about Italy and Italian culture, I will give you the space. But otherwise, I would love to just ask you a couple of questions about you staying in Hong Kong and how that ties into your whole trajectory, and why Hong Kong, why not picking up the language? Kind of like, I think that's a really unique thing too, having so many different multicultural backgrounds and realizing so much about culture that most people don't actually even experience. But then, I'll be just curious about your life in China.
So Hong Kong, I lived there for 1 year and then moved to mainland China in Shenzhen and lived there for 3 years. The reason why we started in Hong Kong is kind of because, at least from my understanding, the perception or like the feeling of Hong Kong is much more international and has more Western influence because of the British colony, because it used to be a British colony. And so my assumption is that my parents probably felt more comfortable living in Hong Kong, but my dad would have to live or like work in Shenzhen in China, mainland China. So he would either take a ferry or take I'm pretty sure there's like either a bridge or a tunnel, probably a tunnel, that goes between the Shenzhen and Hong Kong. And he would either have to do that back and forth, or he would stay in Shenzhen for the work week and then come back home. And because that became a little unsustainable, and it was also, I don't know what other factors contributed to it, but because of that, we moved to Shenzhen because it'd be easier for my dad to just live at home with us and be able to commute that. So that's kind of the story from Hong Kong to Shenzhen. And I'm probably pronouncing that wrong. Sorry for anyone who speaks Mandarin or Chinese or whatever. Cantonese. I try my best. But in those places, so as for the languages, in those places, we mostly lived with international communities. So there's one aspect to where we just had friends from all over the world that were not necessarily Chinese or from Hong Kong. So that's one thing. But a big part of like having absolutely no Chinese skills is that when we lived in Hong Kong they speak Cantonese. And apparently my parents started taking some courses and stuff, and I would also learn a little bit at school. But then when we moved to Shenzhen, where they speak Mandarin, that shift was confusing, and it just kind of set everything back. And it was like, well, we're probably not going to stay here forever. So my parents just kind of learned how to get by and tell a taxi driver, like, oh, let's go left, right, forward, take us to Walmart, things like that.
Did you take classes while being there? Like, how old were you?
I was between the ages of 5 and 8 in China. 4 and 8 like in Hong Kong and China. And so I started in like preschool, I think, in Hong Kong, and then in kindergarten in China, first grade and second grade. That's what I did in China, and it was at international schools. So it was American curriculum in an international school there, and it was filled with students from all over the world. So we had some Italian friends, we had some friends from all over, and in my school we did have like they wanted to incorporate some Chinese culture and stuff to teach you about where you are, but because of my hearing loss and I had some developmental setbacks because we found out that I was basically deaf when I was 4, which is like a pretty late time to figure that out, especially when you're supposed to be able to speak and listen and talk much more at that age. So it kind of set back my development in speech, and also in addition to that, I spoke multiple languages, so that also kind of confuses things with speech. So what I did, instead of going to Chinese lessons in that school, I would be held in with my language arts teacher and focus on reading and writing in English. So I kind of lost that aspect of like the cultural integration that the school was trying to provide.
I love these points, and I really want to tell the listeners this fun fact that you told me the other day, or what you did in China. You would like to share it or not?
Okay. Well, let me set up the story in a way that I remember it that kind of sounds like my parents were not very careful or cared, or I don't know what the word is for that. But
oh my gosh.
They will listen to this and then tell me that it's completely different and that I am probably misconstruing the story and that they definitely are good parents. But basically, if I remember this correctly, we were walking down a street or something, and like this random model scout was like,
oh my gosh,
your 2 kids look like they could model for us, and would you be interested?
This is how all the horror movies start.
That's what I mean. And I may be completely wrong, because I know my parents would not randomly trust some stranger on the street in China.
Let's take photos of your little kid that is 4 years old.
But that's how I remember it. And I would just basically, okay, so I didn't even say what I did. My first job was being a child model, and my little brother too.
Oh my gosh. How old was your little brother at the time?
Yeah.
Do you know that?
3 or something. So I was probably like 5 or 6 because I didn't start immediately when I moved there. So I was probably like 5 or 6, and he was probably 3 or 4.
Lucas, what happened to your model career? You could have been now on the run. Yes.
Yeah. Well, it did me very well. It funded a lot of my travels these past few years. All the money I saved up from modeling in China is what funded a lot of my travels. So if you look at my Instagram and you think, oh my God, how does this person have so much money? Do his parents pay for everything? No. I was just a very successful child model.
Oh my gosh. This reminds me, I have a really close friend, Caro. She went to China for a dual degree, and she was telling me, just to explain how she looks like, she has fair skin, she's European, right? Slim, not in that way. She looks really beautiful, but she's like the ideal Asian, like European standard. And she was walking around on the Great Wall. Is Is that the
Yeah,
name?
the
Wait.
Great Wall of China.
Yeah, exactly. Taking photos. And she was laughing how people were not taking photos of the Great Wall. They were taking photos of her.
Yes.
And she was like, this was the weirdest thing ever, that people were taking photos of me rather than of the wall itself, because I was more famous than the wall. And they didn't ask her if it's okay to take the photos. They just took photos of her. So I'm just saying, for everyone who's going to Japan this year, because we have a trip coming up, not us, but for other people,
Neither of us.
watch out. Don't don't get carried away. Or if you're really poor, get a modeling job.
Yes, it's an option in China. But yeah, I hated doing modeling too. Not that anything weird happened, but just the idea of like changing in and out of clothes was like, I did not like that. But the part that kept me through it was they had American snacks. They had Oreos, they had Cheez-Its, or not Cheez-Its, but Goldfish. They had things like that. And that really got me. Like I was like, I need this. And so I would keep going. Sometimes, yeah, I don't know. It wasn't my favorite thing in the moment, but now that I got to, even though I kind of used up the money at this point, now that I got to use that money to travel, I'm really happy that I did it.
Is there one last thing maybe you feel like that you would love to mention about China and your like life there, that you feel like shaped something about your identity, or even it's just a fun fact that you remember?
I'll go with something deeper out of it, but not go too far into it. For me, in China, we had like a community of friends from different countries and everything, and I got really close to them and really close to living. Like I really enjoyed living there, and so when we moved out of there, that was like really stressful and difficult for me. Like I was very angry and upset and in despair basically because of the move.
Would you say that shaped you in such a way that it even affects you right now, how you bond with people?
Definitely. I think it has become really difficult for me to trust the fact that if I form a closer bond, that it will last, that there's not something that will interfere with that. And so it's hard for me to actually, like, I really want to have deep connections with people because that's something that I really enjoy, and I love hearing someone's like deep personal stories and understanding their perspective on life. But it's really hard for me to show any vulnerability and to become attached, because if I allow myself to do that, if I don't keep my distance, then if they quote unquote disappear on me, if they are ripped away from my life, then I lose them, and that's really painful. So instead, it's easier for me to kind of keep myself be independent and experience that loneliness intentionally than have it happen unintentionally.
Do you feel lonely really often because of this missing connection with people and moving around so much?
I mean, I think it's important to work on on myself, that I can be independent to where if something does happen, I'm still okay. Like I'm still myself and I can still be okay. So not create a codependency with someone to where if something happens where the relationship is not able to continue, that I don't have that codependency and that I can still feel okay. But I also think I need to work within a relationship, in order to build trust, and being able to have a good balance of showing that vulnerability and having that connection with the fact that I also need to be able to be independent and be okay on my own.
I feel like it's such a deep question and deep conversation that you could even continue for another hour and go completely into all attachment styles and how people view each other and find relationships. Do you have any last points that you feel like you just would love to mention about your experience, about finding friends and maybe fighting loneliness, even though we barely scratch the surface?
Mm-hmm. I mean, fighting loneliness is something I'm still working on. So I'd say I don't know if I have any words about that, because it's something that I'm actively working on. As for finding friends, what can you elaborate on what you're asking for?
If you're coming from a background where you are exposed to so many cultures and it's difficult to adapt, is there a certain maybe advice you would give someone based on your experience of living in so many different cultures? How to connect with people that completely are coming from different backgrounds?
I think from my experience, the best way to connect to people is just be yourself, and make sure that you lead with the best intentions, and people can often read that and understand that even if there's misattunement because of cultural differences, that if they see the real you and your rightful intentions, that they can look past that and understand that it comes out of the cultural disparities rather than the your intention, rather than you as what you do or what you might have said or something like that. And I would say that one of the biggest things I've learned traveling and living all over the world is, while there are cultural differences, people are people. People are the same. We all have a desire to love and be loved and for connection. And even if there are cultural things that we might have learned or stereotypes that might interfere with that, in the end, it's possible to break those stereotypes and to break that cultural disconnect between different cultures, and fulfill each other's need for love and connection.
So what I'm hearing is also, don't give up even if you feel like you are between cultures and it's difficult to connect with someone. I think the best way is to share your own stories, to share your own experiences, to actually have this direct intercourse with people, to talk about these things, communicate and understand where you're coming from, what is the person feeling, what maybe even adopting certain traditions, because it's not like because you're Italian you only stick to these traditions, because you're Dutch you only have to follow this rule.
And one last thing is listen. Make sure to genuinely listen to what another person is saying. Because often we just hear to be able to then respond and give our input or our story, instead of listening to what the other person says and then understanding the impact that their story has on their life and on their perspective on life, because then you can see, you have a slightly better chance of seeing the world through their perspective. I actually recently retold what you said when we had the field trip to Neighbor, which is that you'll never be able to fully see or understand someone's perspective on life and their story and what they've been through. But the more you listen and the more you have those conversations, the closer you get to the real picture.
And the real picture is, to just give the maybe last story of this whole podcast episode, is when you sketch. So one person's holding a book. That was what I was talking about. And it's an exercise we did at this organization called Neighbor to Neighbor. Whoever wants to volunteer, feel free. It's a wonderful place with so many really heartwarming people. And it's this community where we work or we mentor different kids that are mostly high schoolers, but also they are middle school kids too, and much younger kids. And it's we had to describe a book cover to another person, and you can't see what the other person is sketching, but also you're facing each other's backs, so you don't actually see each other at all. You can only listen. And one thing that our instructor told us, and that just stuck with me, and I just love to share it, and that was what I did with other students, is when you compare the picture and the actual cover, you realize that through good communication and listening skills, you get closer and closer to the actual picture, but you will never ever completely have a replication of what you actually see in the cover. And the cover represents who we are and how we perceive each other and how we live in our little box. But the picture that we are drawing is how others perceive us and how you're trying to understand. And a good leader and something that you could pick up. And I'm really surprised that you actually retold the story. I feel really honored about that. Is through listening and trying to understand, you get closer and closer to the real you that is sitting in this box, the actual book cover. But you will never actually be completely it's not always the same. It's only getting closer. And that means you need to work and build trust through honesty and through compassion, and work towards what you want to achieve and understand the other person. But yeah, that's a really nice actually closing story. I really appreciate bringing it up. I think it's something that makes me think all the time about this just visualization. Oh my gosh. And Lucas, I'm just so happy that you're on my podcast, that you continuously crazy phrases here, come to my studio and record these episodes with me, share parts of your life. I think that's a really brave thing to do. A lot of people that I talk to, they I would never be in your podcast, because so many people listen to it. But I think it has a greater purpose than being scared of sharing what is actually who you actually are as a person. And I'm super grateful for your time. Do you have last thing or anything you want to say to our dear listeners?
I'll say this because it connects to what I said earlier, and Dr. Odom said this recently in one of our seminar classes for Caldwell Fellows. But we are human beings, not human doings. So just be yourself.
Just be yourself. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Thank you so much, Lucas, for being on my podcast, and see you next time. Bye-bye.